First off, Paul, great to be with you. Thanks for making time for us tonight.
Real honor as always. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I would play the back and forth of what she's done in the past, but here's what Kathleen Sebelius said last year.
What does success look like?
Well, I think success looks like at least 7 million people having signed up by the end of March 2014.
No, she's lying about that. I don't like to throw out lie when somebody is maybe mistaken or they could somehow not be knowingly misleading the American people about something so important like our health care. As you well know, I'm sure you have friends. I have friends who've lost their health care. Really very serious issue. We've dealt with it in our family. And to me, I'd like to start there. 7 million was the projection, and that would be success. 4.2 million announced yesterday. Are they going to reach their goal, Paul?
I think it's pretty highly unlikely. So they'd have to pick up basically to reach 6 million, another 1.8 million between now and the end of the month. I think that's very unlikely. And also, we've had other reports that as many as 20% of the people who are currently, counted amongst that 4.2 million haven't paid their first month's premium, which means they're really not enrolled. So that real number could be significantly lower than 4.2. Maybe it's 800,000 lower, so it's really 3.4. So I think it's very highly unlikely they're going to hit that number. Obviously, these are moving goalposts for the administration. Right now, they're just trying to find any way they can to claim victory.
Okay, but I know I'm preaching to the choir here. People are losing their health insurance. It's destroying the system. Whether you want to look at it short term, in the short term, people losing their health insurance, it's destroyed the system for them, and it's destroying the system long term with premiums going up and making people purchase health insurance they do not want or parts of it, violating conscience, etc. So this is all political?
Well, I think another number to look at, another important number is, even according to the most recent surveys from McKinsey, less than a third of people who were signing up for coverage on the exchanges were previously uninsured. So 2/3 of the people who are quote unquote getting coverage on the exchanges are basically being people who, as you just mentioned, lost their insurance and are buying it now or being shifted over from the small group market. A lot of those people on the exchanges are getting subsidies to buy coverage, but a lot of people are finding it too expensive and walking away. According to the HHS's most recent estimates, about 5 million people or so are eligible for subsidies, but only 4 million people have purchased. So that's 1 million people who are eligible for subsidies but aren't buying coverage because it's too expensive, and millions more, 3 million or more so, who are eligible to buy, period, and just walking away from the exchange. So we're offering more expensive coverage, and if you're getting very substantial subsidies, that's a good deal for you. You're buying coverage, but it's doing havoc to the rest of the system for those who are buying without subsidies, or, as you said, the 5 million, the 4 million people who had their policies canceled.
Okay, and so, again, we go back to it and we say they're looking for a victory. And I look down in Florida 13, you can say it's not all about Obamacare, but it's a driving force. And there are many ways to break down the election, I realize. But do you believe that this sends a signal that we're just on the repeal watch for Obamacare? I'm not trying to look through rose-colored glasses. I'm trying to say that's been mocked. The idea of repealing every word of it's been mocked. I don't think it should be mocked because, quite frankly, I think the people learn more about it through great folks like you who can explain it to the rest of us, and then we see it ourselves and we get hit by the fire that everybody's been speaking to, including Ted Cruz on an all-nighter. Well, I think it becomes more of a reality. So you tell me.
Well, honestly, I think you got to look at the facts on the ground. The facts right now is, even if the Republicans take back the Senate, they're not going to get a veto-proof majority, so maybe they'll pick up 51, 52 seats. They're not going to be able to overturn the president's veto, and that assumes they could, get a bill to totally repeal Obamacare through before then. And even if they, they do that, they're going to get vetoed by the president. So the soonest you're looking at a viable repeal option is going to be 2017 once you have a Republican president, assuming you've been able to hold the Senate. Having said that, between now and then, I'd say the president has wrapped himself into a pretzel formation here, pretzel shape, trying to salvage the law, which means delaying the individual mandate for everyone who had their policies canceled, delaying the employer mandate, and then phasing it in over the next 2 years, doing all sorts of things to the black letter of the law that really stretch it beyond legality in some sense, just to get the law surviving. And that, I think, opens the door to Republicans and conservatives really pushing on this issue of, well, if big businesses get a delay in the mandate and people who have their policies canceled because the new ones are too expensive get a delay, why don't we have a delay in the mandate for everyone else who's facing higher prices because of the law? That, I feel like, is a very tenable angle to push on. You're not going to get repeal on that, but you could probably peel off quite a few Democrats, at least on the House side. I don't think a bill is going to come up unless the Republicans take back the Senate on the Senate side. But you've got a lot of momentum there and can create a lot of headaches, for the White House on that front, and maybe even get some traction.
Are they hinting in any way that they would be amenable to the individual mandate being delayed?
Well, Kathleen Sebelius testified today that there was no way that was going to happen. She said that's not on the books. I think it just really depends on the amount of pain that people are facing. The administration has shown so far that anytime there's any kind of outcry about the law, they're willing to push back and push the deadlines. So it's potentially possible. The big outcry they'd really have to worry about at this point is from the insurers, who would complain that any more delay in the mandate is just going to leave them with a sicker risk pool in the exchange and expose them to further losses. So that's their real problem at this point. But
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's completely out of the cards. I think let's take a look at the enrollment numbers at the end of this month, see where they're at, and if the administration or advocacy groups are saying, hey, let's keep it open for another month or 2 months or 6 months, maybe you've got a different conversation happening.
Okay, and you're looking at the insurance companies, and they're saying, okay, part of the composite is we've got to get the young Invincibles, so to speak, and they have to represent about 20 or about 40%. Right now, from the numbers I've seen, you all have, isn't that about 25%? What does that mean for premiums next year?
That's absolutely right. So HHS released numbers yesterday, and they're touting the increase in the number of young people, 18 to 34, enrolled under the law. It's really just a tiny bump. And overall, it's still just a quarter of the population, 25% of the population. They need about 40% to really balance out that risk pool. So that's not happening because the plans are too expensive, and a lot of people are walking away and not bothering to purchase. And also, even amongst those 25% of young people, you can have young people who are sick, who have pre-existing conditions like lupus or multiple sclerosis or diabetes that make them more expensive patients. So even saying, we've had a little bit of a bump in the number of young people who are enrolling, doesn't necessarily tell you anything about the risk pool. I think what we need to get and what we should be pushing for is more affordable options. So deregulate those insurance plans on the exchanges, allow subsidies to flow to catastrophic plans, making it easier for people to identify health savings account eligible plans. Bring down those prices, get the regulations off of it, make insurance more affordable for everybody, not just on the exchanges but outside the exchanges too. That might actually help more in terms of decreasing the number of uninsured.
Now, tell me, Paul, when you look at government programs and the idea of mending and maybe not ending it and recognizing the realities and really detailed analysis that you gave us on repealing Obamacare, the political realities of that, really appreciate that, by the way. But I'm thinking to myself, I look at programs, a government program, and closest thing to eternal life, I think Reagan spoke to this, is a government program or government agency. I forgot the specifics on that. My point is that if you start working to make room for it, it will inevitably stay, and the nature of government is to work more people into dependence on it, lower the standards for qualifications for subsidies. They don't recognize that there's a $17 trillion debt problem or the yearly deficit problem that we face. So that's the nature of government. So as we're looking to, I like the idea. I don't want to be looked at as, oh, you're just an obstructionist and you don't want to help people. No, I do. I want to help people who don't have insurance, pre-existing conditions or unpaid costs at the emergency room, where it's represent like 2.8%, if I'm not mistaken. And we turn the whole healthcare system around based on one of those fundamental problems, plus pre-existing conditions, which represented a relatively smaller part. So, Paul, my question to you is, when we're speaking to mending it and fixing it, won't we inevitably exacerbate the situation that we have now?
Well, look, I'm very sympathetic to that argument. There's something about a friend of mine, and I talk about this all the time, called the Raisin Control Board. The Raisin Administrative Control Board buys all the raisins in the U.S., and it's, a throwback to the Great Depression days. So that just underscores your point, government programs don't go away. Having said that, there have been some important reforms to Medicare, like Medicare Advantage plans, which are competitive private plans that seniors choose among. And on a head-for-head basis, those plans are less expensive than fee-for-service and get better outcomes. There's Part D, which is another private-based plan, has some subsidies for low-income seniors and other seniors, but also came in about 40% under budget. So you can get more choice and competition in those plans and build on them. And then I'd say, your skepticism about whether or not the program is mendable is warranted, but I also say the biggest chunks of our budget right now going to health care, it's not ObamaCare, it's actually Medicaid and Medicare, spending close to $1 trillion annually on those two programs. So I think conservatives need to have a strategy, and the strategy is let's move this entire health care apparatus into the free market, introduce competitive pressures, and you can use the market or the exchanges, call them what you will, as a tool for doing that. And how do you do that? You level the playing field. Right now, look, the government spends $250 billion a year on employer-sponsored insurance, and that goes to everybody from Warren Buffett on down. But if you don't get employer-provided insurance, you don't get any of that benefit. Level the playing field. Allow everybody to buy at least an HSA, a catastrophic plan with a health savings account, so that they get that financial protection. Low-income people can get more help. Upper-income people shouldn't get any help or very little help.
Okay, but real quick.
Sure.
That's where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? What you just said. Because I agree with you, the means testing. And all of a sudden, then you start saying, okay, but if you make this much, and then there's the skirting of the issue. But and understand, it's real easy to sit back and point out problems. My only concern is politics is the art of what's possible. And this thing has been a disaster. They've lied to us from day one. And they being the government, I'm not about R's or D's, about accountability. And I know you're not about R's or D's, you're about accountability. That's what we want. And what concerns me is that the reform you're mentioning and the idea of making things better, how do you do it? Have we ever seen it done with a program that can be so politicized as what we've seen with Medicare and on the state level Medicaid?
Look, I think it can be. I think one thing that's working in our favor is the budget realities are just impossible to ignore the burden. Medicaid or other healthcare expenses, the number one or number two or fastest growing item on every state budget. Medicare is crushing the federal government budget. Discretionary funding spending across the board is flatlining. Healthcare costs are going up, eating more and more of GDP. You want to talk, and this is something I think Republicans should just take to the bank, conservatives can take to the bank, and saying, look, do you want to know why your paycheck hasn't increased in the last decade? Why income isn't going up for the middle class? It's because more and more of your dollar is going to healthcare costs. More and more of your taxes are going to be going to healthcare costs, not anything else we care about, not creating jobs, not repairing the infrastructure that can allow the U.S. to compete internationally with countries that are chasing us like China. That is an economic growth argument. That's also an argument about healthcare. And then it gets to both the people feeling like they want to be protected from catastrophic events and want to be able to buy insurance. And look, build off of the programs we've talked about before, Part D and Medicare Advantage programs. Paul Ryan's been fantastic on this, talking about how you can give seniors protection but ensure that it's affordable for future generations. And at the end of the day, I think the Democrats have had a tremendous strategy for health care, and that is take a little bit you can get, no matter where you can get it, as long as it's moving towards more government intervention in the market. Republicans, I think, and conservatives need to be very savvy as well and say, look, we're going to push this ball in our direction. We know where the pressure points are and have a real vision, which you and I have talked about before, a vision for telling people how it's going to work for them.
Paul, you make healthcare interesting and understandable. Thank you. Great to be with you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care, buddy. Dr. Paul Howard, Manhattan Institute. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. Latimo on the flip side. AFR Talk.